People should have their notes out for the lecture on European history for Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. We begin with what we're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be posting a video on your Google Classroom stream. Find it there, watch it, follow any instructions I give, and make a public comment. The public comments section is right below where you'll see the video where it says comment, where you make a comment. You will please do this before 4:30 tomorrow. In doing so, you will be counted as being present, and you will get a homework grade. So, please tomorrow be ready to go online, the Google Classroom, watch the video, follow the instructions, and do any writing in the comment section. Questions? Velasco.
Does it have to be relevant to the video, or does it?
I will give you instructions in the video tomorrow. My guess is it probably will, and that will be a happy and wondrous thing.
I'm so happy.
Okay, in general terms, yes?
Is it going to be posted in the to-do section of Google Classroom?
No, I don't do to-do. That's for people who enable and people who understand the system better than I do. No, all it will be is you go to Google Stream and you'll see it, just like you see the videos when you're at home. Yeah?
Are you going to post it, like, you said tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to be, like, by this class period tomorrow?
I have no idea. It all depends. If I'm lucky, I might even post it this afternoon, but I'm making no promises. Okay, so now we are looking over here at Africa. And we're going to look at general regions that each colonial power commanded. So, the French basically control most of West Africa in the Sahara and along the coast. Now, the Guinea coast down here is divided between the French and the British. The French have Senegal, British have the Gambia. French have French Cameroon, the British have the Gold Coast, which is later Ghana. So the French tend to have West Africa. The Belgians end up getting the center of Africa, where Stanley and Livingstone explored. The Congo region, which in the 70s was called Zaire. This region is huge. Belgium actually controls, I think, geographically the largest of the African colonies. Now, the Belgian Congo is not property of the Belgian nation. It is instead the personal property of King Leopold of Belgium. And because it is a personal plantation run for his profit, the King of Belgium is able to do things there that it is likely the government would never have approved of. So, northwestern Africa, French, and a mixture of French and British along the Guinea coast. In the center of Africa, you have the Belgian Congo. The French Congo is next to it. To this day, these countries are split. There is Congo-Brazzaville, which is the former French Congo, which is its own country. And there is Congo-Kinshasa, which is the former Belgian Congo. And both Brazzaville and Kinshasa are the capital cities of the respective Congos on either side of the river. Northeastern Africa is dominated by British colonies Egypt, the Sudan, Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, and Kenya. So this area of East Africa, this arc of territories, is British. The Horn of Africa is Italian Somaliland. When I worked with a lot of Somali students, it was always interesting to me that their English had a remarkably Italian stamp when it came to the use of certain vowel sounds and consonant sounds. And it's because the Europeans that they were dominated by for a while were the Italians, were the Itais. Southern Africa is going to be the story, but ultimately it's going to be British. And Southern Africa includes what's today South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi. The Portuguese controlled 2 colonies near the waist of Africa, Angola and Mozambique. So the Portuguese control these 2 areas here. The Germans are ultimately going to get Southwest Africa, which is Namibia, East Africa, German East Africa, which becomes Tanzania, and German Cameroon and German Togo. Not too much goes to Germany, but the fear of their presence is felt. So these are the various regions of Africa as colonized by the Europeans. The Belgian Congo is particularly infamous for the use of terror tactics to keep the natives in line. Thank you. What that means is that there are mass killings by the Belgian Congo authorities against the various Congolese tribes. And also there are the slaughter of animals that the natives depend on. There are drives that take people out of their tribal lands. Basically, King Leopold in the Congo engages in practices that make the British and French, and even the Germans, who also use pretty firm tactics, blanch, just at how brutal the Belgians can be. And again, Belgium is noted for its, fairly civilized nature in Europe. You've got the Flemish, you've got the Walloons. They're known for chocolates. They're known for endives. They're known for waffles. And in Africa, they're known for absolutely bloody-handed brutality. Go figure. The dark side of Belgium. So, any questions about the colonial regions before we go into Southern Africa? Okay. Southern Africa is huge. It is massive. This map that I'm about to draw does not do justice to it in terms of its scope or scale. The Dutch established Cape Colony around the year 1600. Around that time, the only black tribes that were in the area were called the Bushmen, or the Hottentots. These tribes are not Bantu. They are not Central African Negro. They actually look a bit more like the Australian Aborigines. They have kinky hair, like other Negroes, but they tend to be taller and thinner than the Bantu that come out of Central Africa and southward later. Their skin tends to be a bit paler, and they live a Stone Age lifestyle, old Stone Age to new Stone Age. They are hunter-gatherers. The men hunt, the women gather. And their territory is primarily north of the Cape Colony region where the Dutch first settled. Being so primitive, for the most part, they withdraw rather than encounter the Europeans. So the Dutch often claim, with some degree of justice, that they were the first people to settle this part of the world. And Cape Colony eventually starts expanding inland. In the year 1800 or so, 200 years later, during the Napoleonic Wars, when Helvetica, or the Dutch area, is conquered by Napoleon and incorporated into France, the British are not going to allow the Dutch colony to become French. So the British take over at Cape Colony. Now, at first, the British have a fairly light hand because their goal is to dominate the area with a minimum of force, with a maximum of cooperation from the locals, who are called Afrikaners. Afrikaners are the African Dutch, again, who can trace their lineage back to 1600. So the Dutch colony in Africa is about as old as any colony in North America, north of Mexico. But after the Napoleonic Wars, there's a problem. The problem is that the British Empire, under William Wilberforce, becomes an anti-slavery empire. The Dutch have had black slaves in this area for over 200 years. While the Dutch were there, Bantus from Central Africa began infiltrating into the region, and some of them were captured and brought under Dutch rule. The Dutch system is as ingrained in their culture as the plantation slave system of the American South. To them, it is the natural order of things. God made the savages to work for the civilized. In return, the civilized will convert the savages to Christianity. But had God wanted us to be equal, he would not have made the savages so far behind us in terms of technology, culture, governance, and the rest. So the Afrikaners are not at all open to the British demand that they give up their slaves. Not at all. And what happens is the Voortrek, Voortrek, which is also item 2 in section G, is the mass evacuation of most of the Afrikaners from what is now British Cape Colony. And they are going to go northwest. They're looking for an area, much like the Mormons, actually, in our history, away from outsider control where they can live their unique lifestyle without being molested by the powers of the world. They, like our Pilgrim Fathers, want to found God's new Israel in the wilderness. But unlike our Pilgrim Fathers, they bring slaves. Slaves are transported with them. However, the Afrikaners are not going into a virgin territory that is unoccupied. Because from the 1600s to the mid-1800s, large number of Bantu tribes did move south. Now, among them is a minor tribe known as the Zulu. The Zulu are one of literally dozens of Bantu peoples, and they're on the small side, actually. The Zulu live in the northern fringes of a mountain range that parallels the coast here, called the Drakensberg. Before the Voortrek, again, in around the 1820s, something happens to change things. What happens is a man, his name is Shaka. Shaka, like Temujin, who becomes Genghis Khan, changes the fate of his people from being a small, isolated, minor group within a much larger whole into a dominant imperial power. Like all great leaders, so-called, Shaka seems to be born under propitious signs of magic that people all spot afterwards. There are legends about Shaka's birth that are told after he becomes the great chief of the Zulus. But what we know is this: Shaka was of dubious legitimacy in terms of his father. His mother is known, father not so much. So it's surprising that Shaka becomes a leader among the warrior bands, the Impi of the Zulus. And what he finds is that the way of war in this part of the world is more of a dance than it is a fight. Both sides' armies will march up, chanting and making noise, rhythmically beating their shields, and singing songs about how ugly the others are and how their mothers dress them funny, insulting their parentage and saying how they're going to get killed. And then, after the singing is done, the tribes use weapons that are called assegais. An assegai is a long throwing spear. So they will get within range, and like javelins, they'll throw their assegais, and the other side will try to catch them with their cattle shields. Not get killed, but catch them, show their bravery. And through this system of symbolic actions, the battle is decided. Almost never do both sides close for any great length of time and fight one another. So the fights are at range, they're very symbolic, and they use the long-range javelin-like throwing spear, the assegai. Shaka says, this is embarrassing. Are we men? Because if we're men and we're fighting a war, we should actually fight to kill our enemies. So Shaka develops a new weapon called the Iqua. And the Iqua is a short thrusting spear. The Iqua has usually a long blade, goes to about here, and then a haft. And much like the Romans, the Zulu will march into range and kill, using the same uppercut thrust that the Romans used with their gladius back in ancient times. The Iqua can be used a variety of ways, but it is a thrusting weapon. It's almost like a stabbing sword more than it is a spear. You can throw an Iqua, but that's not what it's meant for. It's meant to close with the enemy and kill by hand as a melee weapon at hand-to-hand combat ranges. So Zulu, under Shaka, change how they're preparing for battle. And the first few times they encounter other tribes, the other tribes are shocked that the Zulu keep marching forward, that they don't stop and throw their spears. Instead, they've got these short little spears, and they actually run up and stab us all. Those jerks! Don't they know the rules of war? So what Shaka does is, by making warfare bloody, he builds the Zulu from being a minor tribe into being a huge empire. Now, Shaka's empire includes dozens of tribes that are related to the Zulus. They all submit to the Zulus, and they are a cattle people. They have what are called kraals. What a cattle kraal is, K-R-A-A-L, is a village slash, I'm actually forgetting, corral for cattle. Like the Maasai to the north, the Zulu are a people of the cow. They are cattle people. They have herds. And these herds of cattle are to be protected at all costs. So just as they protect their own people behind walls to keep the lions out and to keep raiders out, they also protect their cattle. They and their cattle live together in these kraals. Different buildings, but within the same little fortified structure. So the Zulu now control a vast empire. And it's this which the British, actually, who land over here in the province of Natal, For real, that's what they call it. They encounter Shaka and they treat him like a local emperor. In fact, what the British encounter is a lot like the Roman Empire without a lot of steel. They have iron for their spear tips. And the connection between Zulus and Romans is in the way they fight. The Zulu Legion is called an Impii, I-M-P-I-I, and it's a couple thousand men. I-M-P-I-I. Actually, it's just one I. I-M-P-I. There's two I guess. Okay. So Shaka is forging a great empire inland. And then Shaka gets killed by his half-brother Dignane. Assassinated. And all of the generals of Shaka's grand army engage in a movement of peoples akin to the Volkswanderungs after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. What it's called is Mfecane. M-F-C-A-N-E. Mfecane is the great expansion of the Zulus. And the Zulus go out in all directions under different army commanders to try to make colonies. Now, some colonies fail, like in the Natal region, because the British are coming in. Some colonies also fail for other reasons. The Portuguese are already here, or the Voortrekkers are coming. But northwest, north, and northeast, the Zulus end up dominating what will later become Zimbabwe and Bechuanaland, or Botswana, as well as the areas of eastern South Africa. And as the Mfecane happens, the Voortrekkers are marching right into them. So this is going to be a classic clash of peoples. The Afrikaners come up with techniques that are later adopted by American Western settlers. They travel with heavy wagons, and when they camp at night or when they're about to be hit by Zulu Impii, they pull into a round formation called a laager. They circle the wagons, sometimes turn the wagons on their side in order to create walls made of wood. And these laagers are like fortresses. This begins what in Afrikaner history are called a series of Kaffir Wars. Now, Kafir is actually a word from the Arabic for unbeliever. But the way the Dutch apply Kafir is a lot like the way nigger was applied by racists or people who were insisting on racial division or racial supremacy elsewhere. Kafir in the mouth of an Afrikaner is not a complimentary term to black people. So these are the Kaffir Wars, and there are dozens of them, depending upon who you talk to or how you count. But what you should understand is that in battles like the Battle of Blood River, which should give you an idea of just how sanguinary, that is, bloody, these conflicts are, they don't call it Blood River for nothing. They call it Blood River because the blood of Afrikaners and Zulus was so much that it colored the waters of the river for a while. The Voortrek actually moves through the Mfecane to establish new colonies beyond Zululand. These colonies are called the Orange Free State, orange for Protestants and orange for the Dutch. It's their national color. The Orange Free States And the northernmost and most powerful of these is called the Transvaal. The Transvaal means across the Vaal, and the Vaal is a river going through this region. So the Orange Free State and the Transvaal are two Afrikaner republics that are set up beyond the lands dominated by the Zulu. And the Dutch get there by fighting their way through the Zulu. They think they're going to be safe from the British. But the British have established themselves at Natal. So all of this sets the scene for what is going to be the beginning of a movie, which I'm going to show you today and later this week. This movie is called Zulu. It is set during the time of the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. Gold is discovered, or at least the prospect of gold, in Zululand. So the British are going to move inland from Natal across the Drakensberg Mountains against the Zulus. By this point, the Zulus have felt hemmed in anyway by the British to their southeast, by the Dutch to their north, and by Cape Colony far, 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 far to their southwest. So, here we go. Now, please close the shades and shut the window. This movie was made in 1964 in Zululand in South Africa. The place is absolutely authentic. Looks a lot like southern Idaho, actually. And the Zulus are played by Zulus. The king of the Zulus in the movie, Cetshwayo, is played by his descendant, king of the Zulus, Mangosuthu Buthelezi. You actually, at the beginning of the film, are going to see a genuine Zulu marriage ceremony of the old style. And when this battle is replayed, the Zulu are going to use authentic tactics. In other words, it doesn't get more authentic than this. This was also made before political correctness. So there weren't a lot of people around saying, ooh, that's racist. No, you see Zulus doing Zulu stuff. You see Welshmen, British, doing British stuff. And here's the story. The British, under Lord Chelmsford, advance from Natal across the Drakensberg. They leave behind a small unit to build a bridge over a stream at a mission station run by a Dutchman called Rorke's Drift. Chelmsford and his army move deeper into Zululand, but Chelmsford underestimates the Zulus, considering them a bunch of primitive spear-chucking savages. So he doesn't take them seriously. He then leaves about two-thirds of his force on a mountainside while he probes with about one-third of his force blindly into enemy territory without any idea where the Zulus are. Well, at Isandlwana, where he left his supplies, the Zulus attack, and they slaughter everyone. It is the worst defeat in British history up to that point since the Norman conquest. So the Zulus are now in charge, and they're moving southwestward from Isandlwana to try to deal with other British forces. 4,000 Zulu go against 200 Welshmen to try to drive the Welshmen out of Rorke's Drift or destroy them. It is this story of a 2-day battle fought with 4-to-1 odds. Maybe it's only 1,000. It may only be 100 Welshmen, 100, 150. that this movie is going to recount. So, get ready for the beginning of Zulu. We will see more of it later. There is a worksheet on the last 2 pages of your note pack, which you are going to be expected to turn in the day after we're done with the movie.
How were all of the Welshmen killed if they had guns and...
Oh, no. Well, the Welshmen at Rorke's Drift are going to fight. That's what we're going to see. The others, because guns aren't everything. If you use bad tactics, you can. It's like like they do in Hollywood movies. She asked, "How do the British lose if they have guns?" Well, let's say I'm dealing with a dangerous person, and I have a revolver in my hand, and I walk up to the dangerous person into range for them to grab my gun and use it on me, or grab my gun and then stab me, or grab my gun and then stab. See, the thing about a gun is it's a distance weapon. And not everyone in Hollywood movies uses that. Chelmsford, basically, his men on Isandlwana's mountainside were surprised. And they couldn't really organize. So the guns they had ended up being useless.